Hello and welcome back. So in this video we're looking at Steven Garcia. So I'll start with a quick bio, then a case summary. And remember, I know there may be other details that some may deem very relevant, but I'm looking only really at the verifiable sources of information. I have received a comment about certain details in other cases and have to reiterate that whilst the other details would be extremely relevant if true, I only want to deal with those details that are verifiable. Less of the kind of hearsay stuff, but again, I will include that where I think it's kind of relevant, where there's enough of the hearsay. But I will say that also that it's totally uncorroborated as well. I will state that. There was also one common question in some details, and I have to state my sources are from publicly cited articles, statements, police reports, that kind of thing. And if someone knows something different, I suggest you report it directly to the police and the news outlets. You know, the news outlets and the sources that I use for the details in these sort of cases can be taken with a reasonable amount of weight. Is if they come under strict libel laws, they work in conjunction with law enforcement more closely than, frankly, me, and I'm sure most of us do. So again, if you do have details that suggest that any of the commonly accepted details are different than that's actually stated, I suggest you report these and not just write a comment on a random YouTube video. So again, I will state where there are potential relevant details, but it's unsubstantiated. Okay. At the same time, again, hesitant to provide excessive amounts of these types of details so as not to skew the case data. Like and subscribe and comment. Let me know in the comments of anything I may have missed. Though remember, be polite here. This is a community and every comment and point of view is welcome, except when it has some level of malice behind it. That won't be tolerated. You'll be blocked immediately. You know, those people aren't welcome here. You know, but yeah, comment on any extra details I may have missed. It'd be interesting to read if there are further details like that, and perhaps maybe verify those and do an addendum later. Okay, down to business. The biography of Steven Garcia is thus: age 48, living in Cattell Court, Southwest in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Now, I have to state, this address data is uncorroborated and is mostly found on blogs, perhaps due to privacy laws, that kind of thing. So I'm unsure how reliable it is, but it does seem to be a running theme throughout a few. And I think, obviously, if people know that kind of area and the person involved, I think that is something that could quite easily, legitimately be corroborated, you know, through different sort of checks. Obviously, being so far away, I don't have access to the same information as some people do, and I don't know how certain regulations work to validate these sort of things. But it does seem fairly consistent. You can get a grasp roughly of people within that area if they're all saying the same thing then. So, quick sidetrack here. The current disappearances within this area, Albuquerque, is that of Neil McCasland. In the wider area, but still deemed local, so the state of New Mexico, is that of Melissa Cassius and Anthony Chavez. Now, I have to state as well, these are all missing persons and not unalived people, which I feel is quite interesting, that they all meet the same case criteria. And also certain case details are very similar, as we'll see. Also, on a statistical note, for Los Alamos County, which apparently is one of the safest counties in the US, concerning those cases of Cassius and Chavez, statistically, only 0 to 2 people should be missing after 1 year. So that long-term missing criteria as a statistical sort of analysis on that. This area should only really have 0 to 2 people. Now, there's 2 people there straight away, and I think Los Alamos has different transparency laws. So in terms of missing people data, certainly from my perspective over here, I struggle to find any other kind of reports on that as such. So it'd be interesting to see if there are further cases in this area outside of those 2, because then that skews the overall statistical picture of this, and it certainly would indicate perhaps something more sinister or less sinister if it does fit in there. Maybe that's just, again, it falls within that realm of statistical plausibility. Yeah, so unfortunately I don't have the time to search every database for missing persons, and again, it would be very interesting to see the statistical difference. I would say if anyone does kind of like go along this approach, I think the best sort of method would be to check a period covering probably the previous 5 to 10 years to get a rough comparison on average, and then compare it with the 12-month period that these have gone missing as well. And I would measure it from the first to the last and see if you can marry that up with the same time frame period going back 5 to 10 years. Now, for Bernalillo County, that's that of Albuquerque, it seems there are quite a lot of missing persons here, and very, very unfortunately, there seems to be a lot of issue here with missing persons within the Native American community, which seems very unusually high there, which is very unfortunate. But for the statistical data, it should be around 7 to 20 long-term missing for this size of population. And we have 2 here also. So when you combine these 2 sort of counties and the statistical average of the number of people there compared to what should be expected, is roughly about 18 to 44% of missing persons are kind of related to this McCasland disappearance pattern of what would be expected statistically for these 2 counties. But I will say this is slightly spurious, though, as the actual numbers aren't known. As I say, I've not looked into that, so it's really just a broad speculative calculation. So back to the bio. Steven was working as a government contractor tied to the Kansas City National Security Campus, which is also part of the National Nuclear Security Administration. Think defensive nuclear weapons and their stewardship, or even perhaps naval nuclear propulsion. I believe that can still fall under this department. Also, Kansas City National Security Campus manufactures the majority of the non-nuclear components of the military's nuclear weapons. Again, this is pretty reliable sources, and it's been confirmed across multiple different sources as well. I haven't been able to find the exact company he worked for because he worked as a contractor, but there is a LinkedIn profile for a Steven Garcia in Albuquerque for a company called VWR, who are a subsidiary of Avantor. Now, Avantor provide laboratory supplies to advanced tech industries and various facilities, including government ones. And also VWR International is the distribution and logistics arm of the company. Now, reputable sources place him as a property custodian with high security clearance across different complexes, which also matches with that profile of VWR. But it also seems that Honeywell is the primary contractor for the Kansas City National Security Campus, although he could have been a subcontractor to these, and that's fairly common, and also it has been quite well established that he had access to sensitive sites. So, secondly, there doesn't seem to be any information about him. So there's not really any education history, employment history other than his current role. And again, this is from reliable sources, not from hearsay or blogs. I think something like that, it has to be kind of like definitive. If it's not really widely reported in news media and police statements and various records, then I think something like that you can more in the side of speculation, and it might skew things. But so doesn't seem to be any education history, employment history other than his current role, and this fits similar to that of Chavez and other cases. Other cases of those that may possibly have worked in very sensitive areas, which also aligns a lot with internet traceability for security reasons. So you often find people with these high security clearance professions have very limited social media and internet sort of traceability and a footprint, because for that security clearance, and especially the higher you go up that clearance level, you really need to watch what you're doing, because I suppose it ultimately comes down to your job and like certain blackmail aspects and numerous things like that could compromise your clearance. So his last appearance was on the 28th of August 2025, where he was last seen walking out of his home in Cattell Court, southwest in Albuquerque, approximately just after 9 a.m. He was reportedly carrying a handgun in green camouflage shirt and shorts. And again, this is kind of reported in reputable sources, but also a bit of blogs. I think there's enough information out there to say that this could be pretty reliable. This is also similar to other cases, though, where he left behind his phone, wallet, keys, and car, and leaving with the weapon as well. I think McCasland, that was what happened in McCasland's case. And who knows, the others might have done that. It just wasn't reported. But yeah, so in terms of this kind of report, I've no idea where the source or the information actually is. And I can't seem to find a police statement or any definitive witness that states this. It's just what's kind of been reported to the press by multiple in multiple independent news sources, and I think that goes to the reliability of that it is multiple ones, and these people do have access to certain information behind closed doors that we just don't do. And I think if they're reporting it in multiple reputable news sources, then I think you can kind of take it with a degree of reliability. But again, so this case really fits the pattern of disappearances in this area, from McCasland, Cassius, Chavez, leaving items behind, leaving with he had a weapon in this case. McCasland had one. Who knows, the others might have. There's a clear pattern between these. He stops going from 1 suspicious to 3 not suspicious, and I think he starts erring towards maybe 3, possibly 4 even being suspicious. Whenever they're all so similar in such a small area, working within the same environment or the similar, certainly adjacent environments, I think you've got to question this a little bit. So I've pinned these on a map, and we can see the various different locations. So here we can see, this is where I pinpointed the workplace for Garcia. Now this is actually, I believe this is Honeywell. It could be, but as I say, Honeywell seems to be the primary contractor for where he worked, and he could have subcontracted to there, which kind of stands to reason why he'd worked there. And you can see it's a very secure facility, next to no windows, only a few small ones at the front, and they look very, very solid. And you can see this one of his local area where he was reportedly to have lived. You can see that these are quite nice. It's quite a nice area. So I suppose that kind of speaks to his seniority in his profession and kind of corroborates that, really. Here's the location of that in terms of its relation to Albuquerque. It's the town or city, I'm not too sure. And you can see here his work location. For a reference, I'll put on, here is McCasland's home location. Here is Chavez's, and here is Cassius, and here they all are on one map, which shows the entirety, and I suppose it just illustrates how close these cases are to each other. Now again, some of the strange things in this case is the lack of data. I've recently been looking into some other missing persons, not related to the McCasland disappearance pattern, which I will be doing a few videos on after this series. I believe Matthew Sullivan might be the next case I'll be doing, and that's very interesting as well. But in terms of the other ones, I'm enjoying, I'm enjoying the true crime aspect to some of these cases, and I think I probably will do a few more videos on perhaps like just unrelated to the McCasland disappearance pattern and stuff like that. Just perhaps the stranger sort of cases, the missing persons and the unalival sort of cases that are I find a bit weird, that maybe we can kind of look into together. So the lack of information that's readily available to the public is apparent in a lot of these cases. In pretty much all of these cases, there's a clear lack of information. As I say, in comparison to the ones I've been looking at, there's massive gap in information. So that makes me question things. Perhaps these are in witness protection or something. That could be a thought. But then I looked into the standard procedures, or normally witness protection, that kind of thing. All their belongings, all the stuff is acquired and sent to the new location. But then I suppose in extreme cases, would exceptions be made for these high risk sort of government associated people? Maybe. What about foreign agencies targeting these people, abducting them for information or along those lines? They all work in similar adjacent fields, possibly. But I think these are very secure areas. You're talking about Los Alamos, that kind of area, even Albuquerque. There's a lot of government, I think one statistic said it's about 80% of missile manufacture components, non-nuclear parts, were manufactured there. You know, if you have foreign agencies operating within these areas, of such national importance, I can't really see it. You know, there'd be too much risk associated with that, and too many people in the surrounding area that would just be monitoring and watching movements for this exact reason. You know, these are some of the highest security labs in the country. I can't see this being really too plausible. What about contractors? Well, these do operate in these areas. With any like defense work comes contractors, and these can easily bypass local suspicions from those monitoring the area. But then you got to question why. You know, and it's the same argument as if it was the US, the military itself. You know, they have means to arrest people, discredit, etc., that kind of thing. That I don't think they would need to do this. In all honesty, there are plenty of other ways to remove someone they want removing without making them disappear. Both of these points between the military and contractors are, you know, you got to ask these questions. Why not make these look like self-unalivals if that was the goal? You know, so as not to raise suspicions, perhaps. You know, but then again, so many self-unalivals falls outside the bell curve, so they'd have to distribute their actions. But again, that kind of contradicts 4 missing persons, because if you've got 4 missing persons, that falls out the bell curve. So I don't see the logic of that either. You know, why wouldn't you do 2 that disappear and 2 unalival? Perhaps they did all run away somewhere together for some reason that we don't know. You know, I know it's stagnated. Perhaps there's something. I mean, obviously, there's a lot we don't know that's going on in the background. You know, one thing that is for sure is this does look suspicious. And as I've said on other videos, I don't know if every case is. Personally, I feel it insinuates that at least one is like suspicious. But I think that would be a minimum threshold when you're dealing with 4 cases in such a small area. Then if you admit that one could be suspicious, you kind of have to go with, well, there's a plausible element that perhaps all 4 could. But I think that would be an extreme case. It's impossible to say, but I think statistically it seems quite strange. I think the patterns within themselves, they all fit the same sort of procedure criteria, and case, the lack of case information on each of them that's what released is all very similar. There's too many similarities, I feel, in these. Something isn't adding up here either way. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Hopefully the next one comes out soon. I'm going to get looking on that now. And as I say, going forward, I think I'm going to delve into, probably outside the McCasland Disappearance Pattern, but a bit of more true crime stuff. But please comment below and let me know what you think, if you'd like to see a bit more of the true crime thing, because it's certainly, I've got a bit of interest in it. Or if you'd like me to focus primarily on ones related to the UFO phenomena.